partner to you.
مشاهدينا الكرام السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Peace be upon you. You are most welcome in a new episode of our program Rituals at Iqraa, sponsored by the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, Waqf, Dawah and Guidance. It is one of 1,000 episodes to cover the pilgrimage for this year. We will talk today about the days after Eid. Professor Dr. Khalid Abdullah Al-Musleh, the professor of jurisprudence at the Ministry or at the University of Qassim. Our Sheikh, we will talk today about the days after Eid. What are the days after Eid, Al-Tashreeq days, and why are they called this name? Peace be upon you. The days of Hajj are 6, in which rituals of Hajj are performed. We talked about the first 3 and the other half, the 3 days. We talked about Tarwiyah, the day of Arafah, and the day of slaughtering. These are the 3 days. They are the days on the 8th, 9th, and 10th. And the slaughtering day is the 10th day. It is the greater Hajj, as our Prophet, blessings and peace upon him. The acts of Hajj and integrals are within these 3 days. The pilgrimage is Arafah, and the stoning, cutting hair and shaving, and circumambulation. And after that, after going forth circumambulation, they go to Mina. On the mid-morning of the 10th Dhul Hijjah, and he performed prayer in Mina and stayed there. The place was prepared for him in Mina. The rest of the slaughtering day and the night of the 11th Dhul Hijjah, from the night of 11th is the first day of Tashreeq days. 11th, 12th, and 13th day. They are called by this name because the pilgrims, they spread the meat in order to dry them up and to be exposed to the sun in order to dry, and this type of a means of keeping them at that time. There were they didn't have refrigerators and other things in which they keep meat, and at that time they used to salt it and expose it to sun in order to dry, and they use it for a long time after the end of Hajj. And they called Al-Tashreeq for this reason. And there are 3. The 11th, it's called Al-Qar because they stay in Mina. They don't go to any other place. On the 12th, it is the first day of leaving Mina, and they are who are hasty. They leave Mina before sunset. And the last day, which is the 13th, it is the last leaving from Mina, which is the last day of pilgrimage, and all its rituals and acts are completed related to these sites, Arafah, Muzdalifah, and Mina. We have known the days of Tashreeq and why were they called this in this name. The other point is the days of after the acts in the days after Hajj, the 3 days. The first thing which is done, it is not related to Tashreeq, but on the slaughtering day, God says, Almighty, if you finish your your rituals, remember God as you remember yourselves, and even more. And some of them say, give us the best thing in life and the best thing in the next life. In this verse mentioned what the pilgrims should be occupied with after ending the rituals. What are the things done on the slaughtering day? Throwing the jamarat, slaughtering, shaving and cutting or shortening hair, and stoning, and these things. Then the stoning, and to go to stay in Mina to the 12th day or to the 13th day if he is late to leave. What is ordered by God? Remember God as you remember your fathers, or even more, to be occupied in remembrance. And the second verse, he said, mention or remember God in counted days or known days, and if he is hasty in 2 days, and if he is late, there is no harm on him. And all things carried out in Mina, in all his movements, is just to remember God, to celebrate the name of God, and remembrance of God in many forms, throwing the pebbles in the 3 days, the 11th, the 12th day, and the 13th of the Hijjah, because the pilgrims go to Al-Jimar, or sites where Ibrahim, peace be upon him, throw the pebbles, and this remained in all nations after him, and they come to these sites to throw pebbles as our father Prophet Ibrahim did. The first, the second, and third pebbles, and each one is 3 pebbles. It is al-jamarat, it is plural, or the meeting of the meet together, the people, the place to the people to meet in order to stone and to collect the pebbles which they throw. What is the relationship of pebbles with the remembrance of Allah? And he should remember Allah and mention Allah and says Allahu Akbar. God is the greatest with each pebble, with each the Prophet blessings and peace upon him. If he throws the pebble, he looks stands for invocation and supplication, and he supplicated a very long supplication, and he raised his hand. Then he threw the second pebble, and he stood on a place far from the people, and supplicated a very long time, and he was about, and he read about Baqarah or Surah, and he said Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest. Everything is remembrance of Allah. This is according to Allah Almighty, who says remember God in counted days. And the Prophet related by Aisha, the circumambulation is at the house, and throwing the pebbles between Safa and to remember God and remember, celebrate the name of Allah, is only to celebrate the name of God Almighty by his tongue, in his heart, and in his limbs. To say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, God is the greatest, no God but Allah, and the throwing by hand, and the saying or talking using his tongue. there is in the heart. He remembers God in his favors and glorifying him, and feels the sense of the saying Allahu Akbar. God is the greatest of everything, of everything, of every other thing. All these meanings come to the pilgrim, and he mentions Allah by his tongue, by his limbs, by his heart. And these 3 days after Eid, they are days of remembrance of Allah. He remembers Allah even in eating and drinking. The Prophet, blessings and peace upon him, in Sahih Muslim, and he said the days after Eid, the days of eating, drinking, and remembrance of God. In all days, eating and drinking, but in these days, eating and drinking and remembrance, he is worshipping Allah by slaughtering and these are sacrifices given for the sake of Allah. It is a good nutrition to strengthen his body, and because it has effect in strengthening the heart and the body. And he said, eat from it and feed the poor. And he asked a piece of meat from each sacrifice, and from 100 camels he slaughtered them. And there are days of eating, drinking, and remembrance of Allah. They are days of remembrance. He has to say Allahu Akbar. The pilgrims and the non-pilgrims say this in the days, 3 days after Eid. And they worship by staying in Mina all the time, not part of it, if he is able to do. According to the Prophet, blessings and peace upon him, after the going forth circumambulations, and after throwing on the 13th of Dhul Hijjah, the last pebbles, and all this time is becoming nearer and closer to Allah. In encampment to spend the nights of 11th of the Hijjah, the 12th and 13th Dhul Hijjah in Mina. And encampment, some scholars say it is obligatory, some say it is sunnah, and the consensus of scholars say who is able to do such thing. We have a call from Libya. Peace upon you. Yes, your question, please. Peace be upon you.
مرحبا الله يحييك.
هلا.
برنامج طلاق. بالطلاق على السيارة.
What? I can't hear the question. The divorce. He wants the Sheikh to talk about divorce. It is beyond the scope of this episode. Take the telephone number and call me, and I will answer you later. We reached the encampment. The things done by the pilgrim in Mina is to sleep there. It is, they say, some of the scholars say it is obligatory, some say it is sunnah, and the closer is obligatory. And he allowed Al-Abbas to stay in Mina, to leave Mina in order, but because he was occupied in other things, in watering the pilgrims and serving them. and the police, the security, and the patients, the vulnerable, and those who don't find a place, and those who are working in repairing or maintenance of cars, and all these. They give an excuse if they don't sleep in Mina because they are occupied in serving the pilgrims, and they have excuses to enable them to exit from Mina. But if he has no other excuse, he should sleep in Mina. This is related to encampment and sleeping in Mina from after the going for circumambulations and the throwing of Al-Aqaba Jamara on the 13th day. Ali from Iraq, peace be upon you. Yes, question? I have two questions. The reading of the verse, the Safa and Marwa, how many times shall we read it? The second. Is it permissible to combine between the arrival circumambulation and the farewell circumambulation around Kaaba? The virtue of remembrance for the pilgrim, when does it start? As for remembrance, it is from the date of entering in Hajj, is to chant Labbaik, then to say Allahu Akbar, God the greatest, and to have it is the purpose of coming to Hajj is to remember God, to mention that, to celebrate the name of Allah in known days, and for what He has bestowed them, the bounties and boons. It is one of the rituals of pilgrimage. In all acts, he should remember, and it is not only chanting Labbaik. It is one type of remembrance. There is remembrance from in heart, in using the limbs, in all his movements and actions. After an interval, we will come back. Please remain with us. Your service, O Allah. Our viewers, peace be upon you. You are welcome back. And in the second part of our program Rituals, and we remind you, you can follow up this episode in English and French on the main channel, and you use the remote control, and the French at the international channel. We talked about the days of Tashreeq, the days after Eid, 3 days. We have a question. As for stoning, I performed Hajj 2 years ago. The 12th of the Hajj there was congestion, and the people, is it doubt or are you sure that the people did not reach the place where should it be? When did it happen? After, immediately after I threw the stone, the people. Thank you. Is it, what is the legal ruling here? Peace be upon you. My question. And he paid money without slaughtering. Please, a moment. The first question, please. The voice is not clear. Please repeat the question. What is the sacrifice was in Iraq? Is it valid or not? Your question is you didn't slaughter the sacrifice in Mecca, but you did in Iraq. Is it valid or not? What type of Hajj? Is it tamattu with Umrah? You performed Umrah or pilgrimage or Umrah, pilgrimage only. You didn't take Umrah. The second question. What is it?
السؤال الثاني كيف أنا بتغيرك في الحج يعني خليت غيرك
You deputized somebody to perform Hajj for you.
والله أخي
ما هو واضح والله السؤال.
It is the question is not clear.
يعني لو توضح لنا السؤال الثاني.
If you you know elaborate more in the second question.
طيب هو دافع فلوس. طيب واضح سؤال.
Is it clear? Is it clear? Thank you.
طيب شيخنا كنا
Sheikh, we were talking about remembrance. This is the features of these days. The best actions to be closer to God is to be occupied with remembrance and celebration of the name of Allah. It is not limited to certain type. The remembrance of tongue, heart, and limbs, and it is recommended for pilgrims in these days if he is performing Hajj or not. Those who perform the pilgrimage, they are occupied in remembrance. It is absent from their minds. This spot, it is in compliance to the orders of Allah and following the prophets, including of Ibrahim. He is a good example, and the other prophets also. The Muslim, when he sits in this place, it is to worship God and be occupied in remembrance of Allah. Umar used to say Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest, and the others, and even Muna is shaken with their voices. It is not only after prayers or in certain times, in all cases, while he is standing, sitting, and asking God from his favors, and he should be occupied with remembrance and the restricted takbir and the absolute one. What is the relationship between the rituals and the integrals? The rituals are all for remembrance. Between Safa and Marwa, and around the house, and in Mina and all the places, it is you should remember Allah and celebrate His name. The last is to stone the pebbles. In the second, if you are hasty, or in the 13th, and you should say Allahu Akbar, or God is the greatest, with every people. Here are there certain invocations when he throws the people? There is a specified remembrance or invocation as the first Jamara, or the second, or the third, or in the first round, the second round, and the similar as done by some of the pilgrims, and they may have their books and have invocations specified for certain places, and this is not acceptable. It is to say Allahu Akbar when you stone, when you throw the pebbles, and invocations and and supplications in Safa and Marwa. Oh Allah, give us the best of this life and the best of the next life. There are certain things which are, you use certain invocations, but others it is open for them. Fatima, peace be upon you.
أهلا وسهلا الشيخ يسمعك تفضل.
The Sheikh is listening to you. Peace be upon you, Sheikh. I would like to ask you other types of Umrah. Can I accompany my son who is 12 years old as a mahram? When محرم, it means prohibited to get married to. From Sudan, the Sheikh is listening to you. What is your question? The first question. The Prophet, blessings and peace upon him, does he throw or performs the prayer before? After the dawn prayer, the second day? And they say that he moved before sunrise. Is it right? Before the sunrise? Abu Muhammad from Iraq, peace be upon you. Muhammad.
تفضل عيدي سؤالك.
What, repeat your question. 2 years ago I performed Hajj. There was a friend of mine who gave me their hair pipples to throw them for hair. Is it permissible to do so or not? Thank you.
تستكمل الشيخ أو نأخذ الأسئلة.
Take questions. Adil from Iraq asking in the Quranic verse between Safa and Marwa, what is related about the Safa and Marwa are from the rituals of God or the locations where or the sites of Hajj, from circumambulation after performing 2 rak'ahs, and if he is heading towards Safa, if he leaves and he completed the circumambulation and prays at the station of Ibrahim and goes to Safa, and he says that he reads the Safa and Marwa are of the sacred places of Allah, and Allah, we start from Safat because God mentioned it first, and he raised his hands in Safat and he said Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, there is no God but Allah, he all sovereignty, praise and grace is for Allah, and he repeated takbir and invocations, and the companions did not mention that he read that the Safa and Marwa are from the signs or the places, sacred places of Allah. But when he was heading towards Safa, the sunnah in reading the verse at the beginning of going between Safa and Marwa, when you are heading towards Safa, it is not a sunnah. It seems to me as mentioned of the from Saudi Arabia. There is a call. Ayman, yes, peace be upon you. My question. It was very crowded in Muzdalifah, and to go to Muzdalifah, and we prayed sunset and nightfall and remained for a little time and left it. Should we spend the night there or not? The questions. The question of Adil from Iraq. The origin in Umrah to start, and the Hajj to start with circumambulation, then the going between Safa and Marwa. The going between Safa and Marwa is not permissible before circumambulation. If he preceded this and he violates the sequence of these rituals, because it was followed by our Prophet, the circumambulation and prayer first, then going, if it is by on account of being ignorant of this, as the Prophet says, I went from Safa to Marwa before circumambulation. He said there is no harm about it. With regard to the slaughtering day, it is better to give priority to circumambulation, to sa'i, or going from Safa and Marwa. And he said, do it, and there is no harm. As the hadith bin Abbas and bin Amr, whenever the Prophet is asked about this, he says, do it, and there is no harm on you. The effect of doubt in worshipping, in prayers, in Hajj, stoning, or going from Safa and Marwa, in cases whether it is there is doubt during worshipping or after it is completed. When I throw the pebbles of Al-Aqaba, Jamrat Al-Aqaba, after I finished the piece, I doubted that there were 3 or 4. The doubt is after the performance of this ritual. After completing it, it will not affect on it. One should not look at it at all. It doesn't have any effect. This is the first case. If it is after, but during the ritual, or it is, if he should not be have so many doubts, he should go ahead and in his performance of the rituals. If it is during, from the sound man, not always doubtful, and if he doubts 5 or 4, and he doubts whether he prayed 3 or 2, in this case he builds and detects if it is likely that he is through 5, and he should add to that. If he prayed 3 rak'ahs, and if there is nothing likely to him and they are equal, in this case he builds on the lesser. If he is if it is 3 or 4, makes it 2. Whether if it is during performing the rituals and he is not sure, and he should build on it, and there is no harm on him, the doubt after performing the ritual, it doesn't have any influence. He said that he slaughtered the sacrifice in Iraq. I understand that he performed Hajj alone. the performance of Hajj alone, there is no sacrifice. Perhaps what he slaughtered in his country, it is a sacrifice of Adha. It is not by a gift as a gift to the sacred place, but if he slaughters it in his country, it is udhiya or sacrifice for. But what is then your pilgrimage is valid. After the interval, the Sheikh will answer your questions. Please remain with us. Our viewers will come back in the last part of our program, the days after Hajj, the 3 days after slaughtering, and we answered many questions. Abu Mustafa is asking, he paid for Hajj of their father and mother, and he deputized somebody for that. It is legitimate. And according to the hadith related by bin Abbas, that a woman on the day of slaughtering, he said, my father is an old, can I perform Hajj on his behalf? He said yes. It is recommended or legitimate if he is disabled, or if this is if there is nobody and he wants to perform Hajj for his mother or father, it is a good deed. And for the living and the dead as well, for the living and for the dead who didn't perform his Hajj. But if he is living and he is physically unable to perform Hajj, there is no harm to perform Hajj for him. The types of Umrah, it is one type. If she means it is combined with Hajj, there are 3. There is Hajj without Umrah, or Hajj with Umrah and released from it and start his ihram from the place of the site for ihram, and from entry to exit to have one ihram for Umrah and Hajj together, and he is not released from them except after completion of both of them. And he said 12 years. It is not a condition to be of age. If he reaches puberty and he was, intelligent or smart, he can go with his mother or sister. It was in the Sahih hadith from Abdullah bin Umar answered, when shall I throw? If then he said, questioning, when I throw, we used to wait for sun set, and we used to throw after sunset. And the Prophet threw at mid-morning, and they threw the Jamarat after sunset. After sunset directly. It starts with stoning and prayed the lunch in Mina, the noon in Mina. And this Ahmed from Iraq. Please be upon you. I have 2 questions. in prayers and joining them or shortening them. The muhrim can cut his hair before releasing from ihram.
اتصال من هولندا.
From Holland.
السلام عليكم. عبد السلام
Peace be upon you. عبد السلام.
وعليكم السلام.
وعليكم السلام. Peace.
السلام ورحمة الله. جزاكم الله عنا خيرا.
Thank you. Thank you, our Sheikh.
تفضل بسؤالك.
Your question.
بارك الله. سؤال إن شاء الله.
My
أراد أن يحج عن والديه.
he wanted to perform Hajj for his father, for his parents, and the other in other season.
لأحد الوالدين نية ثانية أو يكلف من يكلف هو الذي
Or assign or deputize another one to perform Hajj for them both.
السؤال الثاني يعني
The second question.
يعني ما حكم شرع الله الذين يمنعون المسلمون من أداء الصلاة في بيت الله وذلك حسبا منهم هؤلاء زعموا أنهم
What is the ruling behind those who prevent people from performing prayers in mosques in the house of God because they envy the people and they are Muslims? What is the opinion of the sacred law in this case? Amatullah.
تفضل يا أمة الله.
السلام عليكم.
Peace be upon you.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
ذهبت للحج قبل 15 سنة.
I performed Hajj 15 years ago. I circumambulated
ما سعيت قبل
the arrival circumambulation and the farewell circumambulation. What is the type with Umrah?
طفتي وسعيتي وتحللتي.
I performed then you entered Ihram, but you didn't perform the going from Safa and Marwa. Why didn't you perform Sa'i?
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا. طيب شيخنا
Our Sheikh, the
نجي على كل الأسئلة.
answers, I hope that you will answer all the questions. We have 7 minutes to answer them.
في سؤالين متشابهين.
The questions are similar and they are repeated. They have ambiguity in encampment in Mina. They stayed half an hour. Is it
ما يتعلق بالمبيت
with regard to sleeping in Mina and Muzdalifah? And who comes at the beginning of night, he should stay to midnight or the absence of moon. If he is from the vulnerables and if he is sound and healthy, he has no excuse. He should remain until the prayers of the dawn. If they arrived after midnight and we prayed sunset and nightfall, if they are excused, they did what is required and there is nothing on them. From Iraq, how to perform prayers in Mina. With regard to prayers, we pray on all the times on time. And the people in Mina, they shorten the prayers. But he performed the prayers on time and he did not combine them in Arafah between Asr and the afternoon and the sunset, but in other places he didn't combine prayers. Can the muhrim to cut the hair of others or to shorten or to shave for other? Yes. And it is there is no objection. Do not shave your heads. It is prohibited to shave his own head, and there is no harm if he shaves for others. Abdussalam from Holland, about the intention to perform Hajj, to perform Hajj for his mother or his father and mother, and deputize one in Mecca, or if he arrives for one of them. What does he do? When he comes to the ihram site of his country, his ihram should be for his mother first, because he has priority over his father, and look for someone to perform Hajj on behalf of his father. And he performs the rituals, but he does not chant labbaik, but on what he intended, either his mother or father. What is the ruling behind, preventing or prohibiting people to perform prayers in the mosque? Definitely, the prevention, it is a greater crime. Those who prevent, God Almighty, who allowed for the remembrance of His name and to perform prayers, and those who are men, they are not occupied with any merchandise or any affairs of life. They go to the mosque to remember Allah. This is a greater crime and oppression to prohibit mosque before people, and even to defile these places, or to make any corruption inside them, as seen in some spots of the Muslims, and we should sacrifice these rituals everywhere. That in Amatullah, she says that she didn't perform sa'i, which is between Safa and Marwa, walking between Safa and Marwa. The sa'i in this case, the scholars say, they say it is sunnah, some say it is obligatory, and others say it is an integral and obligatory, and some say it is not obligatory. And in all cases, she is not blamed, but it is not an integral, the likely opinion of scholars, because she is ignorant in it, and it is acceptable for her. In your Twitter, what is the deciding saying? The skin and the hair of the sacrifice. I understand to take it after completing, to take from the hair and the nails. It is not desired, but he can do it because he will refrain from that for 10 days. Perhaps the growth of hair and nails, he needs to clip his nails and to cut his mustache and so on. But it is not related that the Prophet, after sacrificing, clipped his nails or cut his hair. It is a sunnah for all the things indicating that to shorten or cutting. This question, is it permissible to stone the people before sunset? The scholars say on the first leaving of Mina, it is permissible before sunset. And it is Ben Hanifa school and Ahmad school. There is no harm if there is a need, and God is most knowing. And we will answer in tomorrow the other questions. Our viewers, the episode is completed today, 9 tomorrow. Your questions and questions will be answered on Twitter, and in addition to the numbers on this screen, and we hope to meet you. May God keep you and peace be upon you.